She had only wanted a little help, just $100, just until the check cleared. That was all. I did not plan to go to the office that day. My knees ached from the cold. The wind off the river cut right through my coat. But the pharmacist had looked at me with tired eyes and said she could not hold the prescription without payment. So I pulled my scarf tight. I held the small paper bag against my chest, and I went to find the one person I thought would help. My name is Bianca Kingsley. I am 63 years old, and that afternoon I learned something I should have learned long before. Family does not always mean family. Sometimes it just means the people who happen to share your name. The card had been declined at the register. I stood there and felt my face go hot. The machine beeped once, then again. The young clerk said she was sorry. She said maybe I should call my bank. I did not understand it. I had money. I had more money than that clerk would see in 10 years. But the card said no, and I did not know why yet. The office was 2 blocks away. Kingsley Wealth Advisors. The name sat above the door in clean silver letters. My husband built that firm. My husband and I built it together back when the two of us had nothing but a card table and a phone that never stopped ringing. Warren picked the font for that sign himself. He was proud of it. He would have hated what it had become. I want to tell you about the firm because you cannot understand what happened unless you understand what it was. Warren and I started it 40 years ago in a rented room over a hardware store. It had one window. The heat rattled. The floor sloped so bad that a dropped pencil would roll to the far wall on its own. We had a card table, 2 folding chairs, and a coffee pot that Warren swore was older than both of us. That was the whole company. Him, me, and a promise. The promise was simple. We would put the client first. Always. Warren said it so many times it stopped being a slogan and started being a rule of the house. If a product was good for us and bad for the client, we did not sell it. It did not matter how much money was in it. We turned away business we could have taken. We sent people to other firms when another firm was the better fit for them. Warren used to say that if you take care of people, the money takes care of itself. And he was right. Slowly, one honest handshake at a time, that little room over the hardware store grew into a real firm with a real name over a real door. Most of our first clients were women. That was not an accident. In those days, a widow walking into a wealth office got talked down to talked over and talked out of her own money. Warren hated that. So we made it known quietly that a woman could come to us and be treated like she had a brain in her head and a right to her own life. Word got around. By the time we were 10 years in half, our book was women who had been burned somewhere else and swore they would never trust an advisor again until they met us. I sat with those women. I learned their names. I learned the names of their grandchildren. I helped one keep her house after her husband left her nothing but debt. I helped another turn a small life insurance check into 40 years of quiet security. That was the work. That was the whole point of the work. And standing outside that glass door now decades later, I did not yet know that the thing my husband and I built to protect women like that had been turned into a machine for hunting them. But I would learn. Oh, I would learn all of it. I went inside. The lobby was all glass and gray stone. The air conditioning bit at my joints, even in winter. A young man at the front desk asked if I had an appointment. I said I was here to see Sloan. He asked for my name. I told him. He did not react. Why would he? To him, I was just an old woman in a wet coat. Sloan runs that branch now, my daughter-in-law. She married my son Wesley 6 years ago. I remember the wedding. I remember thinking she was sharp and bright and maybe a little cold, but that Wesley loved her so I would love her too. I tried. God knows I tried. She came out from the back in a navy suit. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her lips were painted a careful red. When she saw me, her eyes did not soften. There was no hello, no hug, just a small lift of one eyebrow, like she had found something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. I stepped forward anyway. I made myself smile. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Sloan, honey, I am sorry to bother you here. I just need $100. Just until Monday. My money is tied up somehow and I cannot get the pharmacy to hold my heart medicine. I will pay you back the moment it clears. I promise. I even said I would sign whatever she wanted. I said it like a beggar. I hate that I said it like that. For a second she did not speak. She just looked at me. Then she laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was sharp and quick and loud. It cut across that quiet lobby like a slap. A teller looked up. A couple waiting on the leather couch turned their heads. Sloane put both hands flat on the counter and leaned toward me. "This is a wealth firm, Bianca," she said, slow, each word landing like a small stone. "Not a soup kitchen. If you are looking for a handout, maybe try one of your church friends, or maybe read the back of your pill bottle. There is usually a helpline number on there for people in your situation." I did not answer. I did not cry. I did not even blink. I just stood there and looked at her. At the suit, at the tight hair, at the red mouth, at the nameplate on the counter that read her name in gold. Sloane Kingsley. My name, my husband's name, on her desk. There was a time I saw something good in her. The night Wesley first brought her to dinner. She was nervous. She laughed too loud at Warren's jokes. She helped me clear the plates without being asked. I thought, this one has a spine. This one will be good for him. I was half right. She had a spine. I was wrong about the rest. I gave a small nod. I said thank you. I turned and walked out. The door slid shut behind me. The cold hit my face. The sun was bright, but I felt none of it. I stood on the sidewalk with a bag of medicine I could not pay for. And I did not feel angry. Not yet. I felt something older than anger. I felt tired in a place that sleep does not reach. It was not about the $100. It was not even about the medicine. It was standing in a place my own hands helped build. And being spoken to like a stranger. No. Worse than a stranger. Like a problem someone forgot to remove. Have you ever known a silence like that? Not the quiet of a still room. The quiet that lives inside your own ribs. The kind that creeps in when someone you love looks through you instead of at you. That day I did not need words. Sloane had already said enough. I walked home. It was a long walk for my knees. I passed the pharmacy without looking in. I passed the diner where Warren used to order the same eggs every Sunday. I passed the little brick church with the bell that no longer rings loud enough to reach me. I had no place I wanted to go. I just wanted to be somewhere that was not there. The house was not really my house anymore. That is a hard thing to explain, so let me explain it plainly. After Warren died, I signed the deed over to Wesley. My lawyer told me to keep it. My heart told me to give it to my son. I listened to my heart. That is the kind of mistake grief makes you make. You give away the walls that hold you up, and you tell yourself it is love. So I lived there. In the house I raised Wesley in. In the house my husband died in. But it belonged to my son now, and to Sloane, and every month it felt a little less like mine. When I came in that evening, I heard it before I saw it. Laughter, heels on the floor, the soft clink of wine glasses touching. The kitchen smelled of garlic and warm butter. Once that smell meant comfort. Now it just meant I was in the way. Wesley had mentioned something earlier in the week. A small dinner. A few people from Sloane's team. He said it without looking up from his phone. He did not mention the bank. Of course he did not. And I did not have the strength to ask if he even knew. I set my purse on this bench by the door. I slipped off my shoes. From the dining room, I could hear Sloane's voice, bright and smooth. The voice of a woman who knows how to hold a room. I went to the kitchen. The kitchen is where I belonged now, or at least where I no longer felt watched. Little things had changed in that kitchen. My handwritten spice labels were gone, replaced with neat printed ones. My good soap had been pushed to the back of the sink behind Sloane's lemon soap. My grandmother's wooden step stool, the one Warren carried up from Kentucky in the back of his truck, had been folded away in the pantry like something to be ashamed of. Even the smells were not mine anymore. I picked up the carving knife and started slicing the roast chicken I had seasoned that morning. Nobody thanked me for it. Nobody ever did. It did not matter. I did not cook for thanks anymore. I cooked because it was one of the last things that still felt like mine. Footsteps behind me. Wesley stood in the doorway with a half-empty glass of wine. He looked tired, or maybe he just looked away too much. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, but there was nothing behind it. It was a question out of habit, like asking about the weather. I nodded. That was enough for him. He did not stay. He never stayed anymore. "Sloane says we are short on wine glasses," he said. "Can you bring a few more out?" I nodded again. I handed him the platter of chicken. "This looks great," he said. He said it over his shoulder, already walking away, already back in the laughter. I stood there a moment. This kitchen used to be the loudest room in the house. Wesley did his homework at that counter. Warren whistled while he fixed the drawer that never closed right. My mother taught me to make biscuits at that stove. Now it was just quiet, and the quiet was loud. I let myself remember just for a second. Wesley at 8 years old, sitting right there, swinging his legs, stealing bread off the cooling rack when he thought I could not see. I always saw. I always let him. Warren coming in from work and hanging his coat on the hook by the door and asking before anything else. "How was your day, Bianca, really? How was it?" Not out of habit. He wanted the answer. He always wanted the answer. That was the thing I missed most. Not the big moments, the small ones. Being asked and being heard. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being asked, and I had gotten so used to it that I almost stopped noticing. Almost. Standing in that changed kitchen with the printed labels and the stranger's soap, I noticed everything. And I understood that the woman who used to run this house had been packed away in a box in the pantry right next to her grandmother's step stool, folded up and put out of sight because she was no longer convenient. Now it was just quiet, and the quiet was loud. I gathered the wine glasses, thin, expensive, cold in my hand. I caught my own face in the cabinet glass for a second. Tired, faded. A woman turning slowly into the wall behind her. I carried the tray into the dining room. The table gleamed. Candles flickered. Everything looked like a photograph in a magazine. Something to admire, not something to live in. I set the glasses down. Sloane leaned toward me like she meant to thank me. Her perfume arrived before her words did. "Thank you, Bianca," she said. "Sweet on top, sharp underneath. Just try not to linger too long. Some of the guests might not understand the arrangement. I would hate for anyone to be confused about who is hosting tonight." I did not flinch. I did not nod. I just turned and walked back to the kitchen. The door swung shut behind me. Through the frosted glass, I could still see them. Sloane's hand moving as she told some story. Wesley laughing softly at something. It looked warm. It looked like a family. From the inside, it was made of ice. I sat down on the little step stool by the pantry. I rested my hands in my lap. I did not cry. I had not cried since the night I moved back into that house thinking I was coming home to my son. That illusion had worn away one small piece at a time. This was not my home. It was just a place where I slept. A place where I waited. A place where I remembered what it felt like to be needed and understood that no one here remembered it with me. The guests left near midnight. The house went quiet. I stayed up to clear the dishes because I knew no one else would. The room smelled of cold perfume and old wine. A glass had shattered near the fireplace. The pieces caught the candlelight. I knelt down slow, my knees complaining, and started to gather them one by one. That is when I heard her. Sloane was on the phone in the hallway. She did not know I was still up, or she did not care. Her voice carried low and easy and cruel. "I swear," she said, "she is turning into a walking cautionary tale. The old girl came into my branch today begging for $100, in front of clients. I nearly died." She laughed. That same sharp laugh from the lobby. "Honestly, if I ever end up like her, just shoot me. I mean it. Put me out of my misery." The person on the other end laughed too. I did not move. I did not blink. I knelt there on the floor with a piece of broken glass in my hand, and I felt something inside me go still. Not break, not shatter, just click shut. Quiet as a door. It was not the bank. It was not the dinner. It was not even those words, ugly as they were. It was the sum of all of it. It was every small erasure added up until there was nothing left to erase. I finished picking up the glass. I dropped the pieces in the trash. Not with anger, not with tears, just with a decision. I walked to the hall closet. Behind the winter coats, behind the boxes no one had opened in years, there was a small travel bag. I had packed it weeks ago. I do not know why. Some part of me knew before the rest of me did. I had left it half-zipped, unsure. Now I zipped it the rest of the way. The sound was soft. In my ears it was the loudest thing in the house. I set the bag by the front door. I stood in the hall one last time and looked around. Not to mourn it. Not even to remember it. Just to be sure. The walls did not hold my voice anymore. The windows did not carry my light. Even the floor did not welcome my feet the way it used to. This was not mine. It had quietly decided to forget me, so I would let it. I went to bed without saying goodnight. Wesley was asleep or pretending to be. I lay on my back and looked at the ceiling. My heart was calm. Not sad, not scared, just done. At 5 in the morning, before the sky turned, I got up and dressed in the dark. I folded a note I had written the night before and set it on the kitchen counter next to the spare key. It said only this: "Thank you for letting me stay. Nothing more, nothing less." I stepped outside as the taxi rounded the corner. The morning was gray. The world was not awake yet. Warren's old habits still lived in me. Lock the door twice. Check the stove. Do not look back at a place that has already let you go. So I did not look back. As the car pulled away, I leaned my head against the cold window and watched the house shrink behind the hedges. It looked like a stranger's house. And for the first time in a very long time, I breathed out. Not from tiredness, from release. I did not know what came next, but I knew it would be mine. The motel room was plain and clean and quiet. Faded wallpaper, thin carpet, a kitchenette that smelled of lemon cleaner. The window looked out on a tire shop across the street where old flags fluttered in the wind. It was not pretty, it was not cozy, but no one there expected me to play a part. No voice followed me around with criticism dressed up as politeness. For the first time in years, I could just be. I unpacked slow. I folded my clothes into a dresser that did not squeak. I made a cup of tea from the little welcome basket and sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle over my shoulders like a shawl. No footsteps overhead. No laughter in the next room. Just the hum of the little fridge and the creak of my own bones reminding me I was still here, still standing. On the third day, I decided to check my old post office box. I had not opened it in months. I took the city bus downtown, the same route I used to take back when Warren and I ran the firm ourselves. The driver was new, the seats were new, but the city kept its old rhythm. The long light on Vine Street still took forever. People still crossed the street in that half jog. I still knew every crack in that sidewalk. When I opened the box, there was one thing inside, a single thick envelope. My name written across the front in a familiar hand. Small, careful, a little cramped. Vivian's hand. Vivian Ashcroft, my oldest friend. The lawyer who helped Warren and me set up the firm and the family trust behind it more than 30 years ago. I had not spoken to her in a while. I had let a lot of people go after Warren died. It was easier to disappear than to explain. I stared at the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should feel, like it held more than what was written inside. I walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop I used to know, found a quiet table by the window, and opened it. Inside were statements, quarterly reports for the Kingsley Group, the parent company, the one that sits above the branch where Sloan had laughed in my face. There was a letter, too, in Vivian's plain and honest voice. It said, "It is time, Bianca. You still hold 54% of the voting shares of the Kingsley Group through the Founders Trust. You have held them all along. There is a protection clause in the trust that expires soon if you do not step back in. The full value is listed below. When you are ready, just say the word." I read it once. I read it again. I set it down and looked out the window and read it a third time. I want to be honest with you about something because it matters. I did not forget I was rich. I want to be clear on that. When Warren died, something in me went dark. I stopped opening the reports. I stopped going to the meetings. I signed a paper handing the day-to-day of my own money over to Wesley and the firm so that someone would manage it while I grieved. I told myself it was temporary. Then temporary became a year, then 2. I let the whole thing run without me because looking at any of it meant looking at the empty chair where Warren used to sit. So I did not look. That was my mistake. Not that I forgot the money, that I forgot myself, but the trust, the voting shares, those Vivian had kept safe. Those were the bones of everything Warren and I built. And they were still mine. 54%. Control. The whole firm, the branch Sloan's shiny nameplate, all of it sat under a company that answered in the end to me. I sat very still. The coffee shop faded around me. The hiss of the machine, the scrape of chairs, the students on their laptops. All of it went soft and far away. I thought about the years I had spent shrinking. First from grief, then from giving in, then from someone else's idea of what family was supposed to be. I thought about how I had called that shrinking peace. I had been wrong. It was not peace. It was just quiet. And quiet is not the same thing. At the bottom of the letter in Vivian's careful print was one more line. "When you are ready, Bianca, just say the word." I folded the papers. I slid them back into the envelope. I put the envelope in my purse. I did not know yet exactly what I would do. but I knew how I would do it. Not with noise, not with fire, with something quieter than both. A silence loud enough to shake the ground under the people who forgot who I was. It took me 3 days to make the call. It was not fear. It was not doubt. I wanted the truth to settle in my bones first as a fact and not a fantasy. I wanted to feel all the way down that I could still act, that I still had a say, that my life was not finished being lived on my own terms. On the morning of this 4th day, just after sunrise, I sat by the motel window with a fresh cup of tea and dialed Vivian's number from memory. It rang 3 times. Then that steady voice, calm as still water with just a hint of mischief underneath. "I was wondering how long you would take," she said. "No hello." She never needed one. I did not smile, but something in my chest loosened. "I am ready," I said. That was all. That was everything. Outside, the sun came up over the tire shop and the old flags and the gray morning street. Inside, for the first time in longer than I could name, I felt like myself again. Not a guest, not a burden, not a ghost drifting through someone else's house. Just Bianca Kingsley, awake and ready to begin. Vivian met me the next afternoon at a small coffee shop near the university. She was already there when I arrived, a corner table file spread around her like armor. Her hair was shorter now and gray at the temples. Her eyes were the same, sharp, patient, hard to fool. She did not get up to hug me. That was not her way. She slid a folder across the table and let it do the talking. "This restores your seat on the board," she said. "You have a vacant chair. It has been vacant since Warren died. You can fill it any time you want. You also have the right, as the controlling shareholder, to call a special board meeting and to demand an independent forensic audit of the firm. Nobody can stop you. Not Sloan, not the managers, not your son." I opened the folder. I read every line. I did not perform surprise. I did not rush. "How long does an audit like this take?" I asked. "Months," she said. "Real ones always do. A forensic audit is not a movie. There is no dramatic reveal in a week. There are records to pull, signatures to match, timestamps to compare, clients to contact. If we do this, we do it slow, and we do it clean. We let the numbers tell the truth on their own. We do not shout. We let them feel the cold when the lights go out." I understood that. I had spent a lifetime watching quiet things prove more than loud ones ever could. "There is one more thing you should see," she said. She slid a second page across. A summary. Nothing dramatic on its face. Just a list, client accounts, names, ages, fees. I looked at the names. They were women. Almost all of them women. Almost all of them over 65. And beside each name was a fee structure that made my stomach turn. Management fees stacked on management fees. Advisory charges I did not recognize. Withdrawal rules that locked their own money away from them. "This is the Elder Wealth Program," Vivian said. "Sloan built it. She calls it legacy care in the brochures. It is the crown jewel of the branch. The corporate people love it because the numbers look wonderful on paper." "And underneath the paper," I said. "Underneath the paper," Vivian said, "it is a machine for taking money from women who trusted the wrong people. Quietly, legally on the surface. Slowly enough that most of them never notice until it is too late to fight." I closed the folder. My heart was slow and steady. Warren and I built that firm to help people keep what they had earned. Sloan had turned it into something that took what they had earned instead. In our name. "I want to do this myself," I said. "Not just sign papers and let the lawyers run it. I want to read the files, all of them, every name, every signature." Vivian looked at me for a long moment. Then something almost like a smile touched her mouth. "There she is," she said. We started that week. I want to tell you what the next several months actually looked like because it was not exciting the way people imagine these things. It was paper. It was patience. It was long mornings at a rented desk in a small office 2 towns over, one Vivian leased under a plain company name so nobody at the firm would notice. It was reading until my eyes burned and then reading more. I signed the papers to fill my board seat. Quietly. No announcement. Vivian filed the request for the forensic audit through the proper channel an outside firm with no ties to Kingsley, no reason to protect anyone. That alone took weeks just to set up. Then the auditors began and their work would run for months. In the meantime, I read. By the second month, the shape of it started to show. The numbers did not add up. and they did not add up in a very particular way. Money moved out of client accounts in small amounts too small for any one client to notice over long stretches of time. Fees appeared with names that meant nothing. Reverse mortgage products sold to widows who owned their homes free and clear, with terms buried so deep in the fine print that no ordinary person could have understood them. Interest rates that started reasonable and climbed like a fever. Every one of these was aimed at the same kind of person. A woman, old, alone, recently widowed most of the time, someone who had just lost the person who used to handle the money, someone in exactly the state I had been in 2 years ago when I signed my own life over because grief made me want to stop looking. The names stopped being names after a while. They became people. I could not help it. I had spent my whole working life sitting across a desk from women like these so I could see them even on paper. There was one file I kept coming back to. A woman named Ruth, 78 years old, out in a small house in Norwood. Her husband had died 3 years ago. Within 4 months, the firm had moved her into the Elder Wealth program. They sold her a reverse mortgage on a house she owned free and clear. They folded her savings into a managed account she could not touch without permission. The fees came off the top every single month, small and steady, like a slow leak in a tire. By the numbers in front of me, Ruth had lost nearly a third of everything she had, and she almost certainly did not know it yet. She was still writing thank you notes to the advisor who did it. There was a copy of one in the file. She had thanked him for taking such good care of her. I read that thank you note 4 times. Then I had to get up and walk around the block, because if I did not, I was going to put my fist through something. There was another file. A woman named Pearl 81 who had signed a stack of papers she plainly did not understand because a young man in a nice suit told her they were routine. There was a widow named Josephine who had been talked into borrowing against her home to invest in a product that paid the firm a fat commission and paid her almost nothing. Page after page, woman after woman. Each one had walked into my husband's firm believing the name on the door meant she was safe. Each one had been fed to the machine. That thought sat with me. It sat with me for days. I traced the approvals. Every product like this needed a signature to go through, so I followed the signatures. And that is where the first thing broke my heart. I expected Sloane. Her name was everywhere, of course. Bold, confident, underlined like she was proud of it. I expected her sister Meredith, too. Meredith Vance ran the compliance side, the very office that was supposed to catch this kind of thing, and instead waved it through. Her signature sat right beside Sloane's on the worst of it. But there was a third hand on some of those pages. A signature I knew better than my own. Wesley, my son. I sat very still when I found it. I put down the page and I picked it up again like it might read differently the second time. It did not. There it was. Wesley Kingsley. Not on all of them, not on the worst of them, but on enough. On approvals he should have questioned, on transfers he had to have seen, and on a few in the margin in his own writing a note. Approved. Move ahead. Do not flag. He knew. Maybe he did not build the machine. Maybe he only looked the other way while it ran. But he knew. My boy, who I raised to say please and thank you, who I taught to hold the door and tell the truth, had stood in a room where women were being robbed and had chosen to look at his shoes. I did not cry. I want you to know that. I have wondered since whether I should have. But something in me had already gone past tears months ago on that kitchen floor with the broken glass. Instead, I felt a cold, clear ache. The kind you feel when a thing you loved turns out to be shaped differently than you thought. I told Vivian. She did not soften it and she did not sharpen it. She just wrote it down. It changes things, she said. You should be ready for that. If we pull this thread all the way, it does not stop at your daughter-in-law. It reaches your son. I know, I said. You can still stop, she said. Some people would. I am not some people, I said. And neither were those women on that list. We kept pulling. The third thing I found was the one I did not see coming. And it was about me. I had never understood that day at the pharmacy why my card was declined. I had money. I knew I had money. I said as much to a clerk who could not have cared less. It had nagged at me for months, a small wrong note under everything else. So while I was in the files, I looked up my own accounts. My personal money. The money I had signed over to be managed after Warren died. It was gone from where it should have been. Not stolen exactly. Moved. My personal savings had been swept into one of the firm's managed accounts. A discretionary account, The kind where the firm decides what happens and the client just watches. The same kind of account they used on all those women on the list. They had used the power of attorney I signed in my grief, the one meant to let someone pay my bills while I could not, and they had rolled my own money into their machine. That was why the card said no. My money was locked inside a structure with withdrawal rules designed to trap it. $100 at a pharmacy, and I could not reach my own money to pay for it. Because the people running my husband's firm had quietly folded me in with all the other widows they were bleeding. I sat back in that rented chair, and I laughed. One short, dry laugh, not a happy one, because I finally understood the whole shape of it. The humiliation at the branch and the fraud in the files were not two separate things. They were the same thing. I was not just the woman who could bring this down. I was one of the names on the list. Sloan had laughed in my face for begging $100, and the reason I needed that $100 in the first place was that she and her people had taken mine. She had robbed me and then mocked me for being poor. I did not feel rage. That surprised me. What I felt was almost like relief. Because now nothing was cloudy. Now every piece fit. Around that time a message came in from a number I did not know. A woman named Colleen. She had worked at the branch for years and then left quietly after what she called one too many buried contracts. Somehow she had heard the wind was changing. Her message was short. I know what you are doing. If you need someone on the inside, I am in. I looked at it for a while. I was tempted, but it was not time yet, and moving too fast is how quiet things become loud before they are ready. So I wrote back 3 words. Not yet. Soon. Then I set the phone down and went back to the paper. I want to be careful here, because this is the part that matters most, and the part people get wrong. I did not build my case on a secret recording. I know that is how it works in the movies. Somebody hides a phone, catches a villain bragging, and the whole thing collapses. That is not how it works in life. A regulator will not act on a recording that appears out of nowhere with no name attached to it. It proves nothing they can use. What I built the case on was the paper. The official forensic audit run by an outside firm with its name on the line. The signatures matched and dated. The client records pulled and confirmed. And a complaint filed under my own name alleging breach of fiduciary duty. That is the promise a firm like ours makes to every client. We will put your interests before our own. Sloan had broken that promise 1,000 times over, and I had the documents to show exactly how. When the audit was far enough along to stand on its own, Vivian and I took what we had to the people whose job it is to handle exactly this. The Ohio Division of Securities, which oversees firms like ours. The Elder Justice Unit inside the Ohio Attorney General's office, which exists for crimes against older people. And because so many of the victims were vulnerable adults being financially abused, Adult Protective Services as well. Every report had my name on it. No shadows, no anonymous envelopes, just a woman who owned the company, standing up and saying, "Look at what is being done in my name," and stop it. That was the winter. That was the spring. 5 months of it. 6. Careful work done in daylight with real signatures on real forms. And the whole time from the outside the firm looked exactly the same. That was the point. But inside the cold had started to spread. By the time the auditors were ready to present their findings, it was early summer. Better than half a year since I walked out of that house with a travel bag at 5 in the morning. Vivian called and told me the time had come. There would be a special board meeting, as the controlling shareholder I had called it. Sloan and the managers had to attend. They were given a date and a room. They were not given a reason. I dressed carefully that morning, not expensive, just clean and plain. A gray suit that had been Warren's favorite on me. I looked at myself in the motel mirror for a moment. Then I went to take back what was mine. The boardroom was on the top floor, all glass and river view. When I walked in, the room was already half full. And here is the small thing I noticed first, the thing that told me everything. My chair, the one at the head of the table, the founder's chair Warren used to sit in, had been quietly moved. Someone had shifted it to the side and put a lesser chair at the head, as if the seat itself could be given away while no one was looking. I did not make a scene about it. I simply walked to the head of the table, moved the lesser chair aside myself, and sat down where I belonged. The room went very quiet. Sloan arrived a few minutes late. She was still wearing the navy suit like armor. Her hair was still pulled back tight. But when she saw me at the head of the table in the founder's chair, something in her face cracked just for a second before she smoothed it back over. "Bianca," she said, "I did not realize you were involved in company matters." "I own the company Sloan," I said, quiet, even. "I have always owned the company. You just never bothered to ask." Vivian stood and presented the audit. She did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. She laid it out the way you lay out a body of evidence, one clean fact at a time. The Elder Wealth Program, the stacked fees, the reverse mortgages sold to women who did not need them, the discretionary accounts, the pattern aimed again and again at the same kind of vulnerable client. And then the signatures. On the screen, one page at a time, blown up large enough for the whole room to read. Sloane's name, Meredith's name, and on the third page, my son's name in his own hand. Approved. Move ahead. Do not flag. I watched Wesley's face when his signature came up on that screen. He had not known I knew. He went gray. He looked at me, and for the first time in 2 years, he really looked at me, and there was nowhere left for either of us to hide. Vivian finished. She told the room that the findings had already been reported to the Ohio Division of Securities and the Attorney General's Elder Justice Unit, and that both had opened investigations. Not that they might, that they had. The audit was no longer a private matter. It belonged to the state now. Sloane opened her mouth. For once, nothing came out. The woman who always had the last word, the sharp laugh, the cutting lines, sat there with her mouth dry and said nothing at all. The world she had built out of polish and control and other people's silence was starting to dissolve at the edges, and she could feel it, and she did not know whose hand was doing it. It was mine. But I did not say so. I did not need to. The silence said it for me. Wesley caught me in the hallway after the meeting broke up. His face was still gray. His hands were shaking a little. "Mom," he said. "Mom, I did not know it was that bad. I swear to you. I signed what they put in front of me. I trusted Sloane. I did not read all of it. I should have read all of it, I know that, but I never thought." I looked at my son for a long moment. I saw the boy who stole bread off the cooling rack. I saw the man who had let strangers rob his own mother and never once looked up from his phone to notice. "You did not read it," I said. "That is the whole problem, Wesley. Those women did not read it either. The difference is nobody paid them to protect the people who did not read it. Somebody paid you." He did not have anything to say to that. I did not wait for him to find something. I had a great deal of work still to do, and for the first time in 2 years, none of it involved waiting for my son to see me. That was the week I finally wrote back to Colleen. Soon had become now. I sent her 2 words. "It is time." She was at Vivian's rented office by the next morning, and what she brought with her filled in the last gaps in the paper. She knew which files had been buried. She knew which approvals had been backdated. She had watched it happen for years and hated herself a little for staying quiet, and now she got to stop being quiet, and I watched something ease in her face as she talked. I knew that feeling. I had felt it in a coffee shop with an envelope in my lap. The feeling of a silence you have carried too long finally being set down. We were close now. I could feel it the way you feel weather coming. And still I did not rush. Vivian and I checked every fact twice. We made sure every claim could stand on its own in a room full of lawyers. Because I did not want a scandal that flared up and burned out. I wanted something that would hold. Something that would stick. Something that would still be standing long after the noise died down. The investigation moved the way real investigations move. Slowly. Then all at once. Over the following weeks, the regulators pulled records I could not have reached on my own. They subpoenaed communications. They interviewed clients. The firm's outside partners started to step back quietly, pausing their business until the review was done. Nobody wanted to be standing too close when it finished. And then near the end of the summer, the thing I did not plan for. The thing that broke the other side from the inside. Meredith turned. She saw which way it was going before Sloane did. Meredith had always been the careful one, the compliance one, the one who read the exits before she entered a room. When her own lawyers told her how the state was likely to treat compliance officers who waved through years of elder fraud, she made a choice. She went to the investigators and offered to cooperate. She handed over records. She confirmed dates. And she pushed as much of the weight as she could onto her sister, because that is what people like Meredith do when the ground opens. They find someone to stand on. Sloane found out the way you always find out about that kind of betrayal. Too late to stop it. Her own sister, the one person she thought would never break, had already given the investigators a signed account. The alliance that built the Elder Wealth Program came apart from the inside, and Sloane was left standing alone in the middle of it. The firm placed her on indefinite administrative leave. There was no meeting about it, not really. No speech, no flowers, just a single flat line in an internal newsletter that most people skimmed past. As of this week, Sloane Kingsley will be stepping back from her responsibilities to attend to personal matters. I never read that newsletter. I did not need to. I had learned a long time ago on a kitchen floor with a piece of broken glass in my hand that the loudest thing in a room is not always the voice. Sometimes it is the silence that comes after. And that silence had finally begun to speak for me. The end did not come the way people imagine an ending. There was no single day when the walls fell. It came in paper, crisp, official, and quiet, and it took the better part of a year. That is the truth about these things. The world wants a thunderclap. What you get instead is a slow settling like snow. One notice, then another. Then the ground shifts under people who thought it was solid. The state investigation ran for months after that summer board meeting. The Ohio Division of Securities did its work. The Attorney General's Elder Justice Unit did theirs. They pulled records I could never have reached alone. They interviewed the women on that list one by one gently in their own homes. They matched what those women said to what the paper already showed. By the following winter, it was done. The firm entered into a consent order. If you have never heard that phrase, it is simple enough. It means the company agreed to stop what it was doing to pay for what it had done and to submit to oversight so it could not happen again. Sloane's professional license was suspended while the state weighed whether to pull it for good. Meredith kept hers barely because she had cooperated. That is how it goes. The one who runs first runs lightest. The consent order set up a fund to pay the clients back. I want to be careful and clear about this because it matters more than any revenge could. The money that went back to those women went back to those women. Every dollar the firm was ordered to return, it returned to the people it took from. Not to me, not to any project of mine. To them. That is the law, and it is a good law, and I would not have wanted it any other way. A widow in Norwood who lost her savings got her savings back. That was the whole point. That was always the whole point. The firm's outside partners had already stepped away during the review. Now some of them stepped away for good. The Kingsley name, the name my husband picked the font for the name I once watched go up over a door in silver letters, started quietly disappearing from lists it used to sit proudly on. I felt something when I saw that. Not triumph. Something closer to grief. It had been ours once. It had meant something once. Sloane herself simply vanished from public view. Her office was cleared. The glass door that once carried her name was wiped clean. There was a printed sign for a while that read "Office temporarily closed." Some people said she had left the state. Some said she was still in the city behind drawn curtains in a house that used to be full of dinner parties and investment talk. I never asked. I did not need her ruin. I only needed her gone from the lives of women who could not defend themselves. And she was. It was in the middle of all this that same winter that Vivian gave me the thing I did not see coming. We were going through the Founders Trust, tying up the last of the legal work, when she set a small sealed envelope on the table between us. It was old. The paper had gone soft at the edges. On the front, in handwriting I would know at the bottom of the ocean, was one word. Bianca. Warren's hand. He gave this to me years ago, Vivian said. Her voice was not quite steady, and Vivian's voice is always steady. He told me to hold it. He told me not to give it to you unless the day ever came when you needed to take the firm back. I did not know if that day would ever come. I hoped it would not. But he wanted you to have it if it did. I held it for a long time before I opened it. My hands were not as steady as I would have liked either. Inside was a single page in his plain block print, the same print he used on grocery lists and Christmas tags for 40 years. Bianca, if Vivian is giving you this, then something has gone wrong and you already know it. I built that clause in the trust on purpose, 54%. Enough to take it back if the people running it ever forgot what it was for. I always worried the firm would drift after I was gone, that it would start serving itself instead of the people who trusted us. If that has happened, then you are the one holding the key, and that is exactly how I wanted it. You were always the better half of us. You saw people. I only saw numbers. So go do the thing I could not. Take care of them. I love you. I always will. Warren. I read it 3 times. And this time I want you to know I cried. Not from grief. From something warmer than grief. because I understood sitting in that little office that I had not done this alone after all. My husband had seen this coming from years away. He had reached forward through all that time and left me a door and a key and a reason. He knew what the firm might become, and he knew I would be the one to set it right. He had believed in me before I had remembered how to believe in myself. That was the twist life saved for last. Not the money, not the fall. The quiet fact that I had been trusted and loved and prepared for this by the one man who ever truly saw me. So I did the thing he asked. I want to be very clear about how I did it, because it would be easy to get this wrong, and I refuse to get it wrong. The money the state ordered returned to the victims went to the victims. I did not touch a dollar of it. What I built with my own money, my personal savings finally freed from the trap they had folded it into, and with a charitable fund that Vivian set up clean and separate. As the controlling shareholder, I also took back the branch building itself, the one Sloan had run her machine out of, and I turned it into something new. Not by stealing it from anyone, by owning it plainly and legally the way I had owned all of it the whole time. I called it Larkspur House. The name came without effort. My grandmother grew larkspur along the fence of her farm in Kentucky, tall and blue and stubborn. Her porch was open to everyone. If you were hungry, you ate. If you were tired, you sat. Nobody asked why you needed help. They just passed you the cornbread. That is the kind of place I wanted to build. A porch with the light on. I set it up as a non-profit. A real one, the kind the law calls a 501c3 backed by that separate charitable fund, so no one could ever say it was tangled up with the firm or the money the firm had to pay back. Every form was reviewed line by line. I read all of them myself. My eyes did not miss a clause. Not anymore. Then I called 3 women I had not spoken to in 20 years. Financial counselors I had known back in the early days, women who could read a predatory contract the way a nurse reads a chart. Women who had spent their whole careers helping people and then been quietly pushed out when they got too old to be convenient. I sent each of them one line. I am building something that should have existed a long time ago. Will you help me? All 3 said yes within the day. None of them hesitated. I called Colleen too, the woman who had reached out from inside the firm. Soon had finally come. She came aboard and brought everything she knew, and she knew a great deal. Larkspur House was not a charity in the way that word usually lands. I did not want it to be a place where women came to feel small and grateful for scraps. I wanted it to be a place where they got their power back. We taught people to read the fine print in plain language. We ran workshops on how to spot manipulation dressed up as kindness. We helped grandmothers raising grandchildren. We helped widows fighting to keep their homes. We helped retired nurses buried under debt they never understood. We ran what we called listening circles where women could sit together and tell the truth about what had been done to them without shame, without anyone hushing them. The women came slowly at first, then in a steady stream. Some walked. Some were dropped off by grandchildren who did not ask too many questions. They arrived holding folders against their chests like the folders held their last shot at dignity. I met each one the same way. A chair, a cup of tea, and time. Time is the thing they had all been denied. Sign here. Wait there. Be quiet. Nobody had ever just given them the time. I remember a woman named Lorraine, 71, who had signed a reverse mortgage a decade ago and been told for 10 years it was too late to fix. We read it together line by line and found the opening the salesman had counted on her never finding. I remember Dorothy, who learned to send her first email at 79 and cried when it went through. I remember Faye and Gwen and Hazel and Estelle, each one arriving certain she was the only one. Each one finding a room full of women who understood. I want to tell you about one of the listening circles because it was the day I understood what we had really built. It was a Thursday evening. 8 women sat in a ring of folding chairs in the back room, cups of tea going cold in their hands. For a long time, nobody said much. That is how it always starts. Then, a woman named Estelle, who was 80 and had not spoken a word in 3 sessions, set her cup down and looked at the floor and began. I never told anybody this, she said. Not my kids, not my sister, I was too ashamed. The room went still. Not the awkward kind of still. The kind that holds a person up. After my herald passed, Estelle said a young man came to see me. Very polite, very nice suit. He said he was going to take care of everything so I would not have to worry my head about the money. And I was so tired. I was so tired of being worried. So I signed. I signed everything he put in front of me. I did not read one page, and I have spent 4 years watching my savings get smaller and smaller and telling myself I must have done something wrong. I thought it was my fault. I thought I was just a foolish old woman who could not manage. She looked up then. Her eyes were wet, but her voice did not break. "And then I came here," she said, "and I sat in this room, and I heard Lorraine say almost the exact same thing that happened to her, word for word. The nice suit, the take care of everything, the being so tired. And I realized it was not me. It was never me. They were doing it to all of us, on purpose, the same way every time." Lorraine reached over and took her hand. Nobody said anything for a moment. They did not need to. "It was not your fault," I said finally. My own voice was not as steady as I wanted. "It was designed to work on exactly how good and tired and trusting you were. That is not a flaw in you, Estelle. That is the whole trick. They counted on you blaming yourself. As long as you blamed yourself, you would never come looking for them." Estelle nodded slowly. Something in her shoulders came down an inch, like a weight she had carried for 4 years had finally been set on the floor. "Then we are going to look at your papers together," I said. "This week, and this time you will understand every single word. And if there is an opening in them, we will find it." There was. There usually is. But that is not the part I remember most about that night. The part I remember is the 8 women in that ring of chairs who had each walked in believing she was the only fool in the world, looking around and seeing 7 others just like her, and understanding all at once that they had not been foolish. They had been hunted, and that there is no shame in having been hunted. The only shame belongs to the hunter. Larkspur House grew. The garden out back, which had been nothing but weeds when we took the building, filled up with lavender and rosemary and larkspur, of course, and with older women laughing in folding chairs. Somebody painted a sign over the back door. "This is not charity. This is reclamation." I looked at that sign a lot. One winter afternoon, more than a year after I walked out of my son's house with a travel bag, a letter arrived at Larkspur House with my name on it. Handwriting I knew, folded neatly around a modest check. "Wesley." The note was short. I have read it enough times to know it by heart. I should have said something, Mom. I saw it and I said nothing, and I told myself it was not my business. It was my business. I am sorry. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I finally see it. I read it twice. I did not cry over it, and I did not sigh. I sat still for a moment with my hands in my lap. Then I put the note in the bottom drawer of my desk in a folder marked letters, and I closed the drawer. I did not write back. Some people would say I should have. Maybe one day I will. But some wounds do not need words. They need time, and time is the one thing I finally had enough of to spare. My son had looked away while women like me were robbed, and one of those women was his own mother, and it took the whole thing falling apart for him to turn his head. I was glad he turned it. I was not ready to pretend the turning undid the years. Both of those things were true at once. I let them both be true. Larkspur House kept growing after that. The board voted to open 2 more locations, one across the river, one out in a small town that had never had a place like it. I agreed on a single condition. Each new location had to be run by a woman over 60, not as a symbol, as a fact. Proof that age is not the end of usefulness. It is the beginning of knowing what you are talking about. Experience is a currency. I had spent too long letting people tell me mine was worthless. A local reporter came around eventually and wrote a piece. It was not front-page news. It was a small human interest story tucked between the weather and the sports. The Quiet Architect of Accountability, the headline called it. My name was not in the title. It did not need to be. The story spoke of a woman who had once been laughed out of a lobby for asking for $100, and who now stood at the head of a network no one had seen coming. After that piece ran, envelopes started to arrive, some with checks, some with just a note. "This is for my grandmother," one said. "She never got her chance." "I remember you from the old days," said another. "Keep going. I kept them all." There came an evening near the end of that second winter when I stayed late to restock the shelves. The office was empty and soft with lamplight. Behind the printer I found a framed photo that had slipped down out of sight. An old one, black and white. Vivian and me, 30 years younger, standing in front of the first tiny office Warren and I ever rented, wind in our hair arms, cross-tired and unbeaten. I wiped the dust off the corner and looked at it a long while. So much had changed. The city, the firm, the people around me. But not that. Not the thing inside me that those two young women in the photo had already been made of. I set the picture back in its place and turned out the light. The following spring, the larkspur bloomed early, tall and blue and unapologetic, as if the ground had decided not to wait for permission. I stood at the edge of the garden with a watering can and watched two women I had helped the year before run a workshop of their own on how to spot a predatory loan. Confident, clear, glowing. It was not about me anymore. It never really had been. It was about them. About every woman who was ever told to be grateful for scraps while someone else feasted on what she had earned. A young volunteer passed by with a binder and paused when she saw me standing there. "Are you all right?" she asked. "More than all right," I said. She nodded, not quite sure what to say, but I knew what to tell her. It was the one thing I had learned that was worth passing on. "The world does not change all at once," I said. "It just tilts, just enough for the light to get in. Your job is to keep holding that light. That is the whole job." She nodded again, a little more sure this time, and she walked on. I turned back to the garden, to the blue flowers and the folding chairs and the sound of women laughing about something I could not hear. I was 65 years old now. My knees still ached. My hands still trembled a little when I was tired. But I was not a ghost drifting through someone else's house anymore. I was not a burden. I was not a cautionary tale. I was the reason another woman would never have to be one. That was enough. That was everything.